if you could just chat a little bit about, what it is to be showing in Edmonton, maybe particularly for you, Curtis, as you are born here, raised here, grew up here, but it's been quite a while since you've actually been in the city. And so maybe you could each sort of say a little bit about, what it is to be showing your work here in Edmonton in this particular context.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Curtis, Talwst Santiago. The Talwst is an ancestral nickname that comes from Trinidad because my father and all the Santiago men would be easily identified in their village because our waists are simply very high. And so I'm a Talwst, and so I'm recognized as a Santiago. Reason why for me, it is important now, specifically now, it's because this exhibition, when I kept thinking, why am I interested in Carnival from a time period that wasn't mine? And it's my parents for when they were young and first being able to step out into their own and play Carnival and wear these costumes. It's because I'm from a generation that came to Canada in the 60s, the late 60s, when almost similar to the Windrush movement in the UK, where the Commonwealth that had opened up its doors, Canada opened the Caribbean. And so a lot of my friends' parents who are all around the same age are starting to suffer from dementia, have passed away. The memories are shifting and fading. And in my text up there, it says this exhibition is specifically for my mother and father. And so not too far from here, Churchill Square, where the early Kerry West festivals would happen, is where I began to understand my culture's stories. And then later in life, travel to Africa and parts of the world and see rituals and festivals that felt very similar were happening in the Caribbean in Carnival. And so while my parents are here with me on this earth, I want them to be celebrated in these spaces. I had the opportunity to take them to a very Hamburger Bahnhof in Germany where I'm living. And prior to entering, I'm like, oh my God, my dad is gonna be so bored. This is gonna be, and I was so wrong. I had underestimated their visual language and their ability to connect to, we're talking about a crack on the ground that runs the length of the museum, and then there's a red dot on the wall, something like so conceptual. And my dad to engage and my mom to engage. And then I realized I had been excluding them like that teenager who's embarrassed of his parents from my world in a certain way. And it was time to really celebrate them and welcome them. And so, sorry, I'm taking a bit of time here.
It's your time, bro.
Last night, I had friends from kindergarten, their moms come. And these were the moms that when they had to babysit us all as a group, would bring us to spaces like this and have us run around. And so for them to see this little kid who was always coloring with them now on the walls here makes it extra special. And it's a show of celebration and very nostalgic and sentimental.
I'll take the ball from there. Well, we had a little conversation before that where he was telling me all of that. And what stayed with me is actually what makes it special for me to show here right now. It's actually to be able to be next to him, which is kind of a beautiful coincidence because the first time we met, we talked about doing something together. But when I understood that he was from here and that he actually experienced his Caribbean roots in this area, and now he's bringing a show that is actually talking about relate to what's happening in the show because we share somehow the same legacy when it comes to these events. I've seen these the jabs many times in Haiti. So for me, it's kind of like I'm part of Curtis' imagination by extension, you know? So it kind of creates a different perspective about the certain things that we're looking at together, you know? So to be together, actually, we're nourishing each other, you know, because I don't want to just see the show as something that is not in relation to what's happening around it. You know what I mean? So, you know, if my show is called like A World Discovered Under Other Skies, I would like to believe that what's happening, it's actually it's what's happening on the earth. And, you know, this is the sky, and then this is completing what is happening under that sky, basically. So, yeah, I mean, for me, that's what stays the most, because the show, I've seen it, and I can talk about how it was conceptualized later on during this conversation. But I think it's this kind of invisible collaboration that, for me, is going to stay in my mind, you know? We talked about before, we talked about what are the works in each other's shows that we consider it important, and what are the connections that you see between these works? What are the, you know, is there something that resonates with you on my side that you believe is in conversation with here? And I'll do the same, actually, because I can see a lot of elements.
Well, I think first, the technical, the alchemy of the material of paint, how it can be watered down, how it can be thinned out, how it can be applied in a very thick gesture over the lean, those sort of things I see, which are obvious. But then the other side of it is my mom in her previous life, before accepting spirituality in new forms, I would say that the spirit realm of the works, where things feel ancient but contemporary at the same time. That's what I find the connection. There's this yin and yang where you can stare at a painting that's so beautiful, visually beautiful, but then the underside of it is quite dark. And it's the same here, where this is meant to be joyful, but within joy, there is a range of emotions that you can be scared and still experience joy. Like when you're running from the jab in the street, or the conquerant in Senegal, there's a smile on your face, but especially in Senegal, if you're caught by the conquerant, you're going to be beat by this group of newly initiated men. Like it's quite dangerous. And so those are constantly at play, you know, and where I feel like with your show, it meets me, your work, it meets me where I'm at and what I'm willing to be like, okay, you want to look into the dark side today, and you can see the things of humanity that aren't always sweet and pleasant. But, or if I'm like not wanting to accept that, enjoy the work. Yeah.
So there's a sense of openness. I mean, that's also what I'm seeing in this show also, is that I don't feel like the work is trying to convince me of something. It's a work that is open. It's a work that is actually it's not seducing me, but is accepting to be interpreted in many different ways. You know, I think it's and that perspective feeds the complexities of our legacies, you know what I mean? And not just as with the carnival or with dictatorships and things like that, or historical moments, but also as Black men, Black people, you know. And you talked about spirituality, which I think is very important, because to address that, to accept that we're spiritual beings, I think it's also accepting that we, you know, that's part of our it's accepting our humanity, but with the same breath. It's needed. I think it's needed because it's heavy sometimes to be perceived as a monolith. And I think this perspective reduces the possibilities for us to be different things in the world, you know. and to be fragile also, and to be vulnerable, and to be, you know, all these things. You have a little, yeah.
Yes, I have he's 1 year and 6 months. Felix.
How you talked about your parents, you know, and how they live things that was transferred to you.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think you will transfer to your kid, to your boy?
I hope as for a long period of time, family lineage was very short. Like my parents, it wasn't as important to them as it is to the next generation, I think, especially because when you said growing up in Port-au-Prince, when you were given the catalog of Agnes Martin and all these people, you could easily insert yourself in this world because being a person of color wasn't, because you were surrounded by people of color and you're like, oh, this is a thing that exists in the world and I can exist in the world like with like all these other artists.
Yeah.
For children of the diaspora, where maybe you're not constantly surrounded by people that look like you, there's this search for like, where do I come from? What are my roots? And as over time through travel and recently in Tennessee, a place I would never think that I would find more information about myself. My uncle calls me and says, we have a cousin who was a chemistry professor in just outside of Knoxville. You should contact him because he has a lot of the family history. And so one of the first things he tells me is that, oh yeah, your great grandfather was a Scottish farmer who came to the island of St. Vincent and died in the volcano when the volcano erupted. Mm-hmm. He refused to leave and he was outside always doing his thing and breathing in everything. And from that, his daughter, who then left and came to Trinidad, started a whole other, on my father's side, his grandfather is a white Frenchman. So what I want to pass on to Felix is that we're made up of so many people, mm-hmm. and that the world is a space where you're not just going to be viewed as a mixed race child, and the complexities are beyond labeling. Mm-hmm. And that because of that, the world is yours as well. And you belong in all the spaces that you can enter, because that was felt that I could go to certain spaces because people would alienate you or make you feel or make a comment that you shouldn't be there. And that's what I hope to pass on to him, that through these stories and the more stories that I begin to tell, and that that information is there for him to uncover. Yeah.
There's something you said also that I really liked. I asked him what did he wanted his kid to be, you know, and he said, I want him to be happy, I want him to be kind, and I want him to be proud,
confident,
you know, confident, you know. And I think that's it really got to me because I don't have kids yet, right? But a lot of my friends are having kids, and I can see them change, you know, their beliefs, and they kind of built a different sense of preservation of themselves suddenly because, you know, they kind of
faced with
they want to also secure that human being the more they can and give as much as they can. Talking about giving, I want us to talk about two things: generosity and time.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it's important to be generous as an artist, and what does that mean to you? And I'll answer the same thing later.
It comes down to my mentor, an Indigenous artist in Vancouver, Lawrence Paul Duxwelipton. And I knocked on his door one day after walking past and seeing his work, and I was wanting to become an artist. And I knocked on his door and I asked if he would show me how to paint and all these things, because I had seen his work in a gallery and started dreaming about his work. And then one day I'm going along my route in Vancouver and I'm like, man, this guy's got a lot of Lawrence Pauls. And I look further into the condo and it's Lawrence there painting. And he took me in, and he just would always say, the one day some scruffy looking kid is going to come knock on your door and you're going to have to pay it forward. Also, another thing was like, you're going to cross the finish line Your job is to stand at that finish line and make sure that everyone who resonates or connects to you, looks like you, whatever, but feels drawn to you, you to wait and make sure that they cross that line as well. And I just think, yeah. Oh, they want you to move your mic up. Yeah. I just think that the way towards abundance is to be generous. And the more you give of yourself and your energies and your time, I've found that it's been reciprocal when people are just more than willing to give me a moment of their time or push my career forward and all these things. Yeah. What about you?
There's two layers. There's the generosity of sharing the work, or actually the relationship that I have with the work, and the generosity as a human being, because they're very, very close.
Mhm.
But they're different. And I think there's something about making art and the mastery of making art for me that relates to the capacity to pass it on, to pass it on your understanding and to really get that that knowledge that you have is only valuable when it's transferred.
Mhm.
Same, the knowledge in terms of how you do it, what matters for you in the work, but also the work itself. It's important to give access to the work to the best way you can, because, I was telling you before, I think we will be judged at the finish line
Mhm.
by what we gave, not what we're taking away with us, So that's my mentality in terms of the who I'm becoming as a human being, and that also connects to the generosity of mentoring people. Because like you said, when we were in certain places growing up, there weren't people like us, and because of the privilege I have now, it's important for me to be the person that I would have liked to meet, because I made a lot of mistakes, which is good.
Mhm.
Give me thicker skin.
Yeah.
But if I can tell someone that looks like me in any form and way that, there's a few holes here and there, and,
Yeah.
just so they can get further,
Yeah. And protect their sensitive hearts, because often, yeah.
It's a tough world out there. You don't even have to be very sensitive. It will get under your skin.
It'll get you.
Make you feel like we talked about that briefly, that to be an artist, you have a sense of confidence in yourself, because regardless of our aspirations, artists or not, I really believe that this world is working really, really hard to take our confidence and dignity away from us, make us doubt ourselves and not reach our full potential. And when we talked about it, we both had a strong confidence. Not that
Whether it was naive, but that naivete is necessary.
Yeah, we were extremely naive when we got into this.
Can we give an example? Like of what we were mentioning is the naivete of not even having a body of work. Maybe you've just painted a terrible portrait at like 14, 15, but then to come to a museum and be like, yeah, I can see myself here. Like, and just, it's like, well, you're a long way from that. But that feeling of like we were saying with Basquiat, that radiant child, where everyone I think who starts on the journey, not everyone, but most people I feel starts on the journey, feel that there's just something a little bit special about what they're doing that will warrant being on this wall, even though, they may not be there.
Yeah, that's I totally agree. And I think it's to believe that, I think it's important for everybody to believe that they're special, because we are, and I'm not saying that to seduce you or anything, but I really believe that, when you're entering the world and you manage to preserve that sense of uniqueness inside of you, you tend to do unique things, you know, and that's, I think it's important for all of us to grow in a healthy way, you know. And what about time? What's up with
Time.
time?
Well, that painting taught me a bit about time in the sense of it was the last one I did while I was on residency, and I think it's probably one of the strongest because it had the least amount of time, and it gave me the least amount of time to overthink.
Yeah.
And there was an urgency there that then has sparked a new confidence in me that will go on to the next painting. And it doesn't mean that the next painting I do is going to take, just be like, because it's never that way. You go, I got this. This should be a few hours or a few days, and then you get beat up by the work, and you're like, oh. But it has taught me a lot about just that it's possible when I'm very focused that the amount of time that I'm given, I can make something that feels good to me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that I need months. No, I need months to do it. And because with the birth of Felix, I had to prioritize. I had no boundaries. And we talked about this, is that thing we're saying. We talked about this yesterday. Anyways, I had no boundaries with art. It would be, well, it's your mom's retirement party. And I'm like, oh, but I got this painting on the wall. Or it was like nothing would come before the idea. And now that's just not the case. Like, it's just not, there's this little life that any moment I spend with him, it not only feeds me, but I'm watching him. And it's like, yeah, I don't need 12 hours in the studio of just lounging and exploring my mind. I can prioritize other things. And so, yeah, but then there's also time time in the sense of, I love things that look this canvas originally started in 2017. It was rolled, it's been folded, so by the time I started painting on it, there were creases, there were marks that had happened that really then dictated the direction of it. And I feel like it completely enhanced and it loosened me up. Mm-hmm. So the patina of the sun dry, fading pigment, I'm seduced by what actual time and conditions can do to a work. And that it's not like when last thing I'll say is I remember looking at Manet's in books, and it's so glossy. It looks like a Jolly Rancher candy. It's just, and then you see it in person, and it's hair and it's cracked and it's just and you're like, oh, that's even better. That's even better. So I when I look at these works, I'm like, they're too new to really do what they're going to need to do. That charcoal needs to possibly have gotten rubbed off when it's re-rolled and sent somewhere. It needs that weathering, like the memory that my parents are telling me. Like in the audio, my mom, my father, and I my son sitting around the kitchen table. My mom and I are cooking a traditional dish, and my parents are trying to recall a specific carnival and a fight happened. Mm-hmm. And it's like Seinfeld. They're talking over each other. They're talking over each other, and they're like, and then all of a sudden their memories sync up, and the lyrics are slightly different. The melody is different from each one, mm-hmm. but we know what's happening there. And that is what I hope the works in time begin to feel like.
Oh, I had an answer, but I got carried. I'm in the carnival right now. I have to
the rum punch is kicking.
I'm gonna build on what you said in terms of the patina, because I've made paintings that are actually titled patina, because at some point I really wanted to have the feeling that I'm not creating the work, but I'm finding it. Mm-hmm. Like the work is already on the canvas and I'm just scratching. I'm scratching, and while I'm scratching and rubbing and all of that, what is actually supposed to be there is taking more and more, is getting more and more momentum. And then this thing starts appearing, because I'm very much interested in modes of apparition. How do you go from an idea to something that feels like something, And then how do you decide to keep certain areas of that thing and take it to maturity to a certain point? But I think it's the idea of not creating something, but finding it, take away that sense of authorship. Like, this is my work. This idea, I think, is kind of obsolete if we agree that we're just passing on certain. When we're translating reality in a way that is very close to all of us, you know. So it's not really us, you know. What is? I was telling you what is really is the capacity to juggle, sorry.
Yeah.
My God, to juggle with the transformation of it, you know, and the works become the residue of the thoughts and of the juggling. You know what I mean? And I think that perspective for me takes away a lot of pressure, because I don't feel like, because this object has its own intelligence, I don't have this kind of sense that this is mine, or I have a responsibility towards it, you know? I mean, even though I do.
Can I have two. The first question is, do you ever sketch a composition and then work?
It happens sometimes.
Sometimes.
The sketching of the composition is very much like framing a picture, because there are own lines floating around. And once they hit the canvas, suddenly there's limits. There's a moment the line stops existing because it's outside of the frame. But then, you know, in photography, you learn that you can point into things that are outside of the frame, and vice versa. So sometimes I do organize it just to kind of sit the figure or the place to say, this is where it's going to be briefly. But since they're very, very basic lines, you know, just so I know that this figure is not in the center of the painting, for example, you know.
When you talk about the discovering, I feel like my painting practice is very much one of discovering, and you can tell when it feels confident, where I'm going like this, whatever is under here, I'm going for it, or it's like,
what's the difference? Visually, how would you like describe that, or like, you know, say that this painting was like a dig,
just
that one was like, Jesus, I'm still composing with it, you know.
This is like this. That is just.
And what's the difference for you, like internally? Like, how do you
internally? Even my physicality of while I'm drawing. If I'm open and I'm like with that, it was like, then step back and not just attacking it. And that's why this feels still unresolved to me. It feels still open. Like it's waiting for that moment when I lose all preciousness of the fact that it's since 2017. And I just surrender to whatever you're going to be, and I will put you away after that. It's not there yet. There's nothing more I would want to add to that canvas. There's nothing I could. There's not even looking at it now. I don't see one thing I could do differently. Here, I'm still like, what leads me to think that what I would love to do and experiment with you in the future is to, you know, when they first start excavating and they put the pins around and the soil isn't, I would like for us to send each other our initial excavations.
The first line.
The first, and then allow each other just to then uncover and discover from that point, even if it's not lines, it's paint, whatever, that removal, that scratching of the surface. I would like to know what happens when I scratch at your surface, what appears to me, and vice versa.
Exciting.
I would like to, because I just feel like I've always been waiting for my contemporary. Like Frank Bowling had Hockney and him and RB Katai and all these guys who went to Slave, they had each other. And I feel like now at this stage where I'm getting more confident, where I can look at my friends who are doing amazing work and feel no jealousy and feel no like, oh, I'm not good enough. Like, what is going on? I can look at their work and be curious and feel proud that I'm even in connection and dialogue with these people. And I feel like over the last few years, you and I, the conversations we had, the work is so different, but it's like, I just, yeah, like I feel very honored that I go through this game, this time period with looking at what you're doing and how you navigate the art world. We're in a time right now where a lot of, I'm just going to be candid, a lot of young Black artists are really coveted by the market. In the early 2000s, it was Chinese painters and artists that were like super hot. You have to get them, blah, blah, blah. And some really continued on and a lot lost the value. But it's like, it feels very vicious. And then there was a time not too long ago, which is still going on, where female figurative painters or painters who are doing queer scene, it's just like, oh, we want it, you know? And I just, yeah, the way you navigate it all with it not being solely about the color of your skin or the way you it's about this rigor and this intensity and dedication to the craft. And I admire that so much. Yeah.
I admire your gift too.
Thanks, Mother.
Something you said about that painting, about digging. I'm curious to know, is it the fact that you don't know where you're going, right, within the painting? Is this something that do you deal with that in your life?
That I don't know where I'm going?
Yeah, but you have a sense of where you're going, and how do you bring those kind of certainties that you've built over the years in the work? And how do you compose with not knowing? Because I feel very grateful to be able to do art, because the fact that I've spent so many times trying to make a good painting, it creates a kind of, it forces me to build patience, to build a kind of like relationship to time, a relationship to mistakes, a relationship with several elements that built my character, and I'm curious to know, how does your work informed your growth as a man, basically?
This blank list is the idea that the manifestations, the list of your bucket list of things you want, are on the other side. It's only for him to see. He's the trickster. So his tongue's kind of out, like he's showing you the paper, but you're like, there's nothing there. But on the other side, the list of, and I'm always thinking about, I've always had faith. I remember when I distinctly told my mom in the Catholic Church one day, I'm like, I don't believe what this guy's saying. I don't want to come anymore. And she didn't make me go to church anymore. So when people ask, are you religious? I'm like, I'm not religious in the sense that I believe in one denomination. The greatest thing, though, I did get from my mom teaching me about religion with faith in my most destitute, lowest times, where it's like, okay, is it going to be this cadmium red oil stick that's $28, or is it going to be groceries for the week? And I choose the cadmium red oil stick. There's faith in that, whatever that investment is, that it's going to pan out. It's got to pan out. And even like that has never waned. And so that is the underlying current of, I've always been, my mom would say, be careful what you ask for. You're a manifester. I would watch you as a little kid dream about blah, 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 and you'd make up the story, and then this thing kind of comes true. So I would always be like the ones I liked with Van Gogh and Frank Bowling, and be like, I hope that my career isn't like Warhol, isn't like, like where you just take off and you're super huge. And I wanted it to be steady and recognize that I hope there's a moment when people are looking at my stuff being like, this is horrible. This isn't it. You don't have it. Because those are the artists that I would always read about like years and years later, it was because maybe it wasn't their time. And when I first started doing the dioramas, oh, I got laughed at. Galleries being, oh, that's cute. Oh, we don't look at art like this. Da, da, da. So yeah, I'm within the uncovering. I know that one day this will resolve itself, and that feeling will be like when you finish the hardest level in Mario or some video game. Like, but I have faith that it'll get there and patience that it'll get there because I'm in this forever. I've worked an office job.
That's on you.
It couldn't go for me. I couldn't, the security that other friends had didn't feel like security to me. Yeah. Yeah.
That's beautiful, man. That's really nice. I have a question for you actually, in relation to the Infinite series. I'm interested to know, because I know you said it's a series that is, it's not stopped. It's something that you continuously,
As long as my hands, I have the dexterity to do it. Yeah.
You're gonna keep on. At what moment that you understood that it's something that you're gonna be doing forever? Because I have a relationship like that with a project, which is a drawing book that I produced 5 years ago. And I said to myself, every 5 to 6 years, I will produce another drawing book that will summarize a selection of drawings. And the idea is to have a kind of lineal kind of growth and understanding of my perspective as somebody who's drawing, and I'm just committed to it. So next year, I technically have to work on this second book, but actually, I don't. I'm asking you a question, but I'm wondering, like, I'm asking myself the same question. I don't even have the answer yet, but I'm curious to know, when did you know in the making of this series that it's something that you will be doing for the rest of your life? Like, at what moment it clicked?
There's like, I think there's two, or there's like, no, let's say there's two. So I make these tiny sculptures in jewelry boxes that we during the pandemic, like during the opening closing periods of the pandemic, we're showing here, and they're just tableaus of scenes from either art history or personal life. The ones I chose to show here were little tiny scenes using like train scale models of my parents' basement in the 1970s. And the series was called Soca in the Suburbs. And so it was the 70s shag carpet, that orange bar, the orange rotary phone, the avocado green, all of those feelings, the shag carpet. So with that series, when I made the first one, I had asked the universe, after seeing on my first trip to the Met a portrait by Van Gogh of just a self-portrait, and the line of people to see this portrait were from all walks of life. We're talking like the construction guy with his kids, it's summertime, he's got to do something, to like, the European art people who are, with their perfectly round glasses, and you can tell by the aesthetic that he's probably an architect or something. These stereotypes were all there, but they all were there to see this piece of art. And I was like, I hope I make something one day that is almost like pop music, in a sense that no matter who I show it to, it resonates. Mm-hmm. And when I made the first diorama, I would be catching a bus early in the morning, and there was this older Chinese woman we would sit in silence because our worlds felt like they couldn't be further apart. And one day I had the courage to go like this to her, and she opened it, and that bridged the gap. And every morning after that, did you have another one? And we would talk, and there was this, and I was like, okay, this is the thing. Because my music would be very specific. You have to like rap or this, or you have to like, everything else was if my paintings had to be very, like, you have a specific taste if you like the type of work that I'm doing. Mm-hmm. The diorama is across the board. And that's when it was like, that's why I called it the Infinity series, because I also had an art critic early in my life say, well, how long can this be a thing? And I'm like, you would never turn to a painter and be like, well, how long can you paint on canvas for? Like, I felt it was just so crazy, And so those two moments after that, them telling me that, I'm like, well, I'm never stopping this.
Change your life.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
I never saw that coming. It's interesting that you see that those objects they touch people regardless where the realm of life.
Regardless of the subject matter, it could be highly political. It could be, and when you say touch, what draws me to them is that often these ring boxes, some of them I've had are 100 years old, some are 25 years old, some are five. They've been held by, I get them mainly from vintage stores, eBay. They've been held and sat in a drawer and you know, little, I remember always opening up my mom's engagement box to the point that it was like worn down, and like it has this history of frequency running through it, a patina, you know, and of life. Yeah.
The idea of not knowing I think it's playing with something that, like, you know, it's playing with the moment of, I can't stop thinking about this kid that you have this gift and you're just like, there it is. And then you're like, oh, the kid is excited. And I think it's a part of us that never changes.
That playful.
Yeah, that playfulness, that there's something in this to discover. There's something in this that, you know, and it's so little that it's personal. You know, this discovery is for me, you know? And I think, strangely enough, good paintings, big or small, they have the capacity to kind of draw you in. And it starts, I like to say, a good painting, it takes your eyes, then it takes your body, then it takes your soul, you know. And if you're ready to let go to it, it will grab you, you know, deeper and deeper and deeper. And that's the same experience when, you know, with this, it's intimate and you can see, so much, you know.
Let me ask you something. As you say, Viola, you make these gestures, your ceramics, your works can feel very serious. And not to say that ceramics aren't serious, but it feels for me more of a playful element. Do you feel that when you were, and what do you attribute that playful feeling?
Playful?
Yeah.
Well, it's funny we talked about discovery and opening the box, because there's an immediacy in tracing those lines, you know? Even though it's a long process in terms of the cooking.
All the after,
oh my God.
the aftercare.
But the shaping of the lines, and there's two artists that influenced me. And it's George Lyoto that you probably know, or you should look up. He's a Haitian metal cutter.
Okay.
And Bill Trailer.
Oh, yes.
You know, the way that he uses
I see it now.
the lines.
I see it now.
And creates strong metaphors, you know, in very simple ways. I used to say that the best artists are the ones that mastered the shortcuts in their work, because we're all trying to do a good painting. That's the hardest
you never
part.
step up there. You're hoping that
the studio, all of us religiously trying to do a good painting, you know, and sometimes it's a good day, sometimes it's a bad day, but we're all aiming the same energy. And what happened is, as you make more and more and more paintings, you're trying to look for shorter ways to get to where you want to go.
Less illustrative for me.
Yeah. You see, that's we're all trying to find the shortest way to get to where we want to go. Not that we want to get there faster.
Yeah.
We just want to see it, because we're the first to explore. We're the first to see our work. So we're the first to have a heart on.
Yeah.
And we're the first to know, oh my God, this is, I'm enjoying this, right? So it's kind of a selfish context. But when the ceramics, for me, when I'm doing it, the cutting and all of that, things happen very fast. You know, there's moments you're like, because if you cut it in the wrong way, you just lose it, right? So that's where the playfulness comes into play, because you're in direct relationship with the material.
We talked a lot about the joys of and the importance of naivete, because it allows you to step into spaces maybe you shouldn't have, but you're there now. Your entry into ceramics, was there training, or was it like primarily self-taught in that medium? It's
self-taught, and what got me to that is the alchemy. You know, the ultimate idea that you can take the four elements and create an object that has a spiritual value. For me, that was, because maybe that's what I was trying to do in painting. you know, but to literally use air, like soil, a fire and
Water.
water,
Yeah.
and then put it together in a way that just generates something that touches first me and then other people. I was like, I need to kind of dab into this. And thankfully the curator pushed me to do some more, because I did the first one in China. And then when I came back, it was like, we would like a few of them, but then it exploded. And now I'm full on doing sculptures,
Okay.
literally 3D. And if you told me I would be doing this, I would have been laughing.
Yeah.
You know, but it comes from the playing with your hands and then just like beating the soil, literally the clay, and then end up with something and be like, okay, my God.
Yeah.
And because I'm a painter, I use the paint a lot of colors. I can see how I'm going to glaze it.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
It's kind of like I'm already 3-step. If it doesn't pop in the
kiln.
Because the ceramics, that's where I learned to do this a lot. You know,
You just surrendered to
it
like,
just goes like this.
Yeah.
When I started, my mentor at the time, who's my assistant now, told me, you need to learn to let go from the get-go.
Mm-hmm.
Because this thing, you might get to the finish line, and lucky you. If you don't, you might miss a few feathers, or you might not get there at all. You know?
Yeah.
And I've went through all of the phases of putting a piece that cracks, putting another one that blew up, putting another one that got to the finish line. And so it's the alchemy of it, and figure it out, you know, to and bring it into my painting, you know.
How do you feel about we field some questions? Are there any questions?
Or comments? We can go both ways.
Yeah.
Or disagreements also.
Yeah. So,
we're not here with any kind of precious knowledge.
okay. Okay. So this acts as a personal map of my journey and my family's journey as I know it. So hidden in lines, or for just something very clear, this is Monrepo, AKA the Scheme. That's the nickname for the neighborhood that my mom and dad grew up in and met in. And so here we have these Christmas lights that hang from in my mom's veranda. They hang around this column, but they then turn into outline Alberta, specifically Sherwood Park as it comes up through here and tucked in behind through various points or let's say the reason why the Great Wall of China was here is because I was manifesting to have my work be shown over there. I've always wanted to see the Great Wall of China since very small. And I've realized that I could use art and my ideas to make some of these things happen. And so when this painting leaves here to Shanghai, and so this drawing was placed on here in 2017 before I started to develop the contacts. The power of the number 6 is of like more life, the continuation of life, and also it can be considered if you get double sixes, it's lucky, those sort of things. And so the dominoes constantly in various ways add up to 6. 6 here, 6 here, we have 6 here, then we have 6 here again, and then this is a 6 as well. So there's just, it's like codes, little secrets and codes of spaces, the Rockies. I lived in Vancouver for a long period of time. Here's a silhouette where there's some of the facial features of my mom, and it's meant to act as this kind of angel flying throughout over the whole scene. Waterways from within Trinidad, different lakes, little rivers and streams that are important and places I visited. And I initially thought it was something that would be folded up, and it's unfolded and it acts like it sits in your pocket and it's always changing. This is my mom's yard where she finally built her dream house in Trinidad. And she often sits in the veranda, which is out of frame. And when I first started conceiving this work, her and I were sitting here together talking. And so it's like a collage. I continue to add elements from my story and a reminder, and but also again, I believe strongly in manifesting and projection. And so just this is key to me because my brother, who is my nephew's here, his dad would always tell me, write it down, write it down. Spelling is casting a spell. You want it to happen, write it down. Just don't say it. Don't just text it write it down. And so I have tons of lists that if you're to see my studio, you see all these goals and dreams and hopes on these things. Yeah. Yeah. And then again, outlines of different places, countries and provinces, and yeah, spaces I've inhabited. And there's just so many. The drawing initially it was more of like a map and just tons of lines of spaces intersecting into creating these abstract shapes. And then over since January is when I started painting it. Well, that's me. Well, that's me. Initially, I took this picture and it was a selfie and he was holding a cell phone, but I felt that was like just a little too heavy-handed. I'm obviously in the work. You don't need a fully rendered image of my face. I didn't want it to be that. So then I started thinking more and more about the jab, or the trickster, Eshu, who's always kind of playing jokes and has all the secrets. And like I said, his tongue is sticking out as he's like playing another game with everyone. But the jab horn, and this was when I was in my Marvin Gaye vibe, when I was always wearing a toque rolled up, and this was actually taken during my first trip to China. So, but it represents me. No problem.
Yeah.
So background, I had fun in the role with the kids teaching music. Now as a psychologist, it's not fun, but I get a lot of satisfaction. Do you have paintings that like were just fun? Or like some that are just, you just have to get it out and it's just the heaviness kind of thing, but there's a satisfaction. What does it look like even if you're
Well, can you hear me?
I think it's for
Okay.
online, yeah.
Okay, great. So it's all of that, in the sense that there's paintings that there's something that happened in 2015, and that's particularly for this idea of urgency, okay, and in a painting. In 2015, I had an accident, and I almost died. And when I came out from the accident after recovering, it was during my graduating show. And at that particular moment, I was working on a book called Story of the Eye from George Bataille. You should read it if you haven't. It's really good, very funny book. And what happened is that, I literally almost died. And when I came to myself, I asked myself, if this was my last show, would it be about George Bataille? Story of the Eye? And the answer was no. All right. And at that particular moment, I had to ask myself, what is necessary for me right now? Because I'm an artist. I do art, and I want to do it particularly for that show, and from that point on, with a sense of urgency, that doing it is necessary to me. And I'm telling you that story because there's certain paintings in that show where I started them with a concept that was important to me at the time. But then the painting just took me somewhere completely different, and in the certain pieces with a sense of physical urgency, not just like mentally, but my body was craving for putting something out. And Sacred Burden is a good example, and Collision also, where I'm like, okay, I'm going to trace this, trace that, blah, blah, blah. And then when it started, this is not what was supposed to happen, basically. On the other hand, sometimes I make pieces about, I did a piece of ability, Or if I want to stay in the show, prophetess, two, one or two. Anyways, there's one of the prophetess here where I started with a strong concept and I had to build on that. So it was more difficult for me to slip, right? And because I work with the formless, with the incapacity to grab in something, sometimes I work on several paintings, because there's someday I come to the studio, I cannot contain what needs to get done. So I cannot work on that painting now. I have to focus on other things. Sometimes I stop, I read, or I call a friend, or I have a beer, whatever I need to kind of myself. You know, when we were talking, the important being in the studio is mainly to spend time with yourself. You know, that's why I said the job of being an artist so far taught me a lot about my humanity, because I've learned to be patient. I've learned to sit with my anger. I've learned to, you know, accept not having answers on certain things. So all of that, thankfully, was nurtured by a studio practice.
Could you each talk about the process of titling?
Mm.
Oh, you want? I can go.
You go for it. Yeah.
Okay. My concept. Well, my concept. The way I understand titles, it's always like that. It's like I stand right here, and I have a rock in my hand, and I throw the I can. And where the rock lands, that's the title of the piece. And by what I mean by that is, even if the title is really, really far, there's always something coherent or that is related to me, basically. And sometimes the rock falls right here. You know what I mean? And then it's obvious that I'm trying to portray something, a moment or somebody. But title, it took me a lot of time to understand how important it was, because just like colors are the first signifier of the aura of the piece, because it's the first thing the atmosphere of the piece, even from far you can see certain the colors, or you're drawn to them or not. A title is also something that adds another layer to the imagination around the object that you did, you know. And sometimes it can be precise, extremely precise, when I'm working on history, for example. And sometimes you can, and even emotionally also, because there's a piece that's called The Unknown, you know, as if I could paint something that is perceived as unknown, you know. And I'm interested in these concepts, loyalty, vulnerability, because it's kind of impossible to paint them. It's impossible. But I like to start working when what I'm trying to portray becomes impossible for me to do. Because it means I'm starting in a space of infinite possibilities. And that's where I like to work, because it's closer to my existence, which is something that is forever becoming, to quote Bergson. What you got?
I hate titling work.
Straight up.
Yeah, I asked one of my close friends who knows my work, we talk a lot about it, to send me titles, and they will always deliver something that is much better than I would have come up with. I never liked titling my songs because I felt like the first thing would be very obvious. Mm-hmm. And so, I contract that out to someone I respect tremendously, and they always come up with something beautiful.
That's an interesting collaboration, because, you know, it's intimate, and that person has a particular understanding of your work over time. Yeah. Because you did the work, you know what needed to be done in the work, and you know what you brought in each work, and that person also know what he brought or she brought in terms of titles for each one. You know, it's like a long story.
Yes, and the relationship is long.
It's like a story that is one sentence.
Totally.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's like I woke up, and then I got dressed, and then I went out, and then the sun was out, and then and then goes in 3 paragraphs of, you know, which is interesting. because time, our existence, like that, time is just one thread that can be cyclical or linear, depending on what you believe in. But I think it's just going and going and going and going.
Time for one more question. Okay, we'll answer one more question and then we'll okay, what challenges? I'm going to assume in the practice, or like, I think it's the same challenges everyone has in life. The challenges of at time confidence or energy. Yeah, what challenges? I think in the beginning, just unwillingness to make space for someone who has ideas that, like for me, with my ideas and with who I am as a person and as a Black person, as I think the biggest challenge is early on, willingness to make space.
For you.
Yeah.
For your imagination.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you read what are the challenges we face, you face? Strangely enough, I was raised in a family that was very liberal, so they've breeding, they bred
yeah.
a certain confidence in me. But then when I decided to be an artist, it was challenging for them because of the uncertainty that came with it. You know what I mean? So then they came to me and were like, "Are you sure? Is that like, But then they gave me the confidence, right? So I could just say whatever. I'm just doing whatever I'm doing, So I don't know if it was a challenge, but it was definitely a bump in the way because they were projecting their fears on me. And what Curtis said, for occupying the space that we occupy, there's a lot of people that puts their fears and their limitations on what we could be in the world, or who we are, as a matter of fact, not even what the future, but also the present. So the challenge is continuous. It's a challenge of every day seeing the fears of other people that are kind of diminish you and take away your dignity at the same time. So yeah, that's a challenge that is continuous for me because I'm always expanding in my head, like this year, I know how to ride a bike. Next year, I want to ride an helicopter. And the year after, I want to ride a spaceship, whatever, because it's fun. It's exciting. I want to live an exciting life. Thankfully, I will. Hopefully I will.
Thank you all for your time. And thank you for your online.